The hunt begins. Before we dive into this chilling story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications because you won't want to miss what's coming next. Trust me, this story is darker than you could imagine. It was a quiet January morning in 1974 when the Otero family, living in their modest home on East 13th Street in Wichita, Kansas, vanished from the world in a single violent act. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale light over the snow-covered streets, and by 8:20 a.m., the silence was broken by a call that would alter the course of the city forever. The phone rang at the local police department, the voice on the other end frantic. "Something's wrong at the Otero house. Please, you've got to come quick." When officers arrived, the scene was something out of a nightmare. The Oteros, a mother, father, and 2 children, were found bound, strangled, and left in their home as if carefully staged. No signs of forced entry, no obvious motive, but something was terribly wrong. The scene didn't feel like a typical crime. It felt like a performance. The neighborhood, which had always been peaceful, turned tense. Detectives scoured the house for evidence, hoping to find something, anything that could lead to the killer. But all they found were strange details that suggested a twisted level of control. The bodies were positioned in such a way that it seemed almost like a ritual. The bindings, the meticulous arrangement, the eerie calmness of the crime scene, all pointed to someone who took their time, someone who enjoyed what they were doing. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure grew. The Otero family's murder was the talk of the town. The city was paralyzed with fear. What kind of monster could do such a thing? Then, in March of that year, a letter arrived at the Wichita Eagle newspaper. It was like no other letter they'd ever received. The writer, someone calling themselves BTK, claimed responsibility for the murders. He outlined in graphic detail the events of the night he killed the Oteros. He taunted the police, mocking their investigation. The most disturbing part was the tone calm, methodical, as though he were simply reporting on the weather. But the message was clear. Bind them, torture them, kill them. BTK didn't just want attention, he wanted to control the narrative. He wanted to be remembered, to be feared. And most terrifying of all, he promised more victims. For months after the letter, there was silence. The investigation stalled. The police had no new leads, no new suspects. As time dragged on, many started to wonder, was BTK just a phantom, a sick joke? Or had he truly gone into hiding, waiting for the right moment to strike again? The next blow came in April 1974. A woman named Catherine Bright, just 21 years old, was found dead in her home. She had been strangled, her body left just as the Oteros had been. The police, reeling from the previous murder, began to draw eerie connections between the 2 killings. The same meticulous nature, the same brutal execution, and once again the killer was out there, mocking them from the shadows. Catherine's brother, Kevin, had been with her when she was attacked. He survived the attack but would forever be haunted by the man who tried to kill him. He gave police a description of the killer, a man with dark hair, wearing a mask. But like the Otero family's case, there was nothing that led them to the killer, nothing at all. Yet, once again, BTK sent a letter to the police, another taunt, another warning. This time, he made it clear that his next murder was already planned, and the police would never catch him. His chilling words echoed in the back of the investigators' minds. The most exciting part is the hunt, not the kill. For years, Wichita lived in fear, and the police tried everything they could think of to catch BTK. They released sketches, they interviewed suspects, they staked out neighborhoods, but the killer was always one step ahead. His signature was unmistakable, but still, they couldn't track him down. And just when the case seemed to be fading into history, BTK resurfaced. It was 1985. After nearly a decade of silence, BTK sent another letter to the police, his words colder than before. He had been living in plain sight. He was everywhere and nowhere all at once. Forensic technology had advanced, and there were whispers of new techniques that could uncover his identity. But BTK was confident he had already outsmarted the police for over a decade. What could they do now? The chilling truth was that despite his long silence, BTK was still living in the city. He was still watching, still playing his game. And with each passing year, he became more brazen. his control over the police tightening like a noose around their necks. But what no one knew, not the police, not even his closest friends and family, was that Dennis Rader, a seemingly ordinary man, had been hiding in plain sight this entire time. Rader, a father, a husband, a churchgoer, and a seemingly upstanding citizen, had a dark secret. He was the very man who had been terrorizing Wichita for more than a decade. He was the killer who taunted the police and the public with his taunting letters, his unsettling signature, and his sick game. Dennis Rader was BTK. But the real shock came in 2005. After years of silence, BTK sent another letter this time, in a desperate attempt to prove he was still in control. Little did he know, his overconfidence would be his undoing. Cliffhanger. The police had been waiting for a break. When a mysterious package arrived at the local news station, it contained more than just a letter. It contained a floppy disk, photographs, and a chilling message. The police could hardly believe their eyes when the evidence led them to Dennis Rader. But was this really the breakthrough they had been waiting for? It was a cold February day in 2005 when Dennis Rader's world began to crumble. For years, the quiet, unassuming man had been living a double life. By day, he was a husband, a father, a compliance officer in Park City, Kansas. But by night, he was the infamous BTK Killer, the man who had terrorized Wichita for over 3 decades, leaving a string of brutal murders in his wake. For the people closest to him, Rader was nothing more than a regular middle-aged man. He had a job, a home, a family. He taught Sunday school. He had served as the president of his church board. But behind his friendly demeanor, Rader had been hiding the darkest of secrets. He had been hunting, torturing, and killing people for the thrill of it, writing taunting letters to the police and the media along the way. And now, with his own hands, he was about to sign his fate. The investigation into BTK's true identity had gone cold for years, despite the infamous killer's periodic return to taunt police with letters. The murders were terrifying enough, but what made BTK's reign of terror even more chilling were the taunts he sent to the police after every crime. His letters were full of cryptic messages, mocking the authorities for their inability to catch him. Each letter grew bolder, the killer's sense of power and control increasingly clear. Then, in 2005, BTK made a mistake, a critical mistake that would unravel everything. The package arrived at the Wichita Eagle newspaper station in late February. It was a thick envelope, sealed with care, and within it was a floppy disk, a medium that had long since been outdated, even by the standards of early 2000s technology. Along with the disk were several photographs, most of them disturbing and grotesque pictures from the crime scene of one of BTK's previous victims, Vicky Vagral, a woman murdered years earlier. Rader had included this as proof for photographs, letters, and journals documenting every crime. Rader's obsession with BTK was undeniable. It was clear now he had been living in the shadows, feeding off the fear he created, knowing he was untouchable. And when they questioned him, Dennis Rader didn't flinch. He calmly confessed to all 10 murders. He talked about his kills as though he were discussing a hobby. Each chilling detail of his crimes came with the same cold detachment that had marked his letters all those years. But the most disturbing part was that he never seemed to understand why what he had done was wrong. The interviews with Rader were a shocking glimpse into the mind of a serial killer. As he spoke about his crimes, he explained the thrill he felt when he planned them, when he followed his victims, when he finally captured them. It was a twisted sense of pleasure, a sense of power that Rader could not or would not explain. The city of Wichita, along with the rest of the world, was left reeling. The monster they had feared for so long was no longer a ghost. He was real, a man who had blended into society without anyone suspecting a thing. Cliffhanger. The capture of Dennis Rader was a victory, but it came with a haunting truth. Even though Rader had been arrested and convicted for his crimes, questions still remained. Was he the only one involved? Could there be other unsolved cases that bore his signature? As investigators looked deeper into his past, they uncovered chilling new possibilities, and one of them was still too dangerous to ignore. What else had Rader hidden from the police, and would he ever stop killing? It was the summer of 2005 when Dennis Rader, once the quiet, seemingly normal compliance officer from Park City, Kansas, was formally charged with the murders of 10 victims, his terrorizing reign of nearly 3 decades finally ending. But for the families of his victims, the sense of justice was a complex, twisted thing. They had waited for years to understand who had killed their loved ones, and now they finally had the answer. But as the pieces of Rader's life unfolded, an unsettling truth emerged. This was not the entire story. As Rader sat in his cell, awaiting trial, investigators sifted through the evidence they had collected over the years, hoping to uncover any additional details. They knew Rader had confessed to 10 murders, but was that all? He had lived among them for so long. Had he left behind any other victims? And why had he waited so long to come back into the limelight? The police began looking into cold cases, reviewing unsolved murders from the 1970s, 1980s, and even the 1990s. Could BTK have committed more crimes than anyone had realized? In the months following Rader's arrest, detectives reviewed hundreds of old case files. The horrifying realization came slowly, but it was undeniable. There were patterns emerging in cases that hadn't been connected to BTK. Murders that had been labeled as random or unsolved now seemed to have the same chilling hallmarks as the ones Rader had confessed to. The victims were often strangled, their bodies left in carefully chosen locations. Many had been bound, their limbs tied in ways that mirrored Rader's signature. The eerie similarity between these unsolved cases and the ones Rader had already confessed to left the investigators questioning how many lives he had actually ruined. It wasn't just 10. The numbers could be much higher, but the breakthrough came when Rader's own journals were uncovered, inside, without the possibility of parole. But even in prison, Rader's legacy continued to haunt the investigation. New questions surfaced, new leads emerged, and rumors of other victims persisted. Could BTK still be out there, still hiding in plain sight, waiting to strike again? The families of Rader's victims were left with a haunting question. Had the monster really been stopped? Or had he merely gotten away with more than anyone knew? And what about the other families who had lost loved ones to his cruel, twisted hand? Would they ever get closure? Or were they still waiting for their answers? Answers that might never come. The final piece of this tragic puzzle came just a few months after Rader's conviction. The FBI, in a shocking move, began to publicly question whether there were more victims than originally thought. Some even speculated that BTK's true body count could have been much higher, that Rader had never truly stopped killing. As the world moved on, some felt the weight of Rader's final letter, where he had written, "I will not rest until I have killed again." Final twist. In the fall of 2007, a decade after Rader's arrest, a local family found the body of a woman in a park just outside Wichita. The scene was eerily similar to Rader's earlier murders: bound, strangled, staged. The case reopened with chilling implications. Had Rader somehow been involved? Was there a copycat killer? Or, more terrifyingly, was Rader involved in a way that no one could yet understand? Rader's life behind bars was far from over. The investigation was just beginning. The real horror of the BTK case wasn't just the murders. It was the questions that remained unanswered, the unsolved cases, the chilling possibility that the monster who terrorized Wichita may still be influencing the world from his prison cell. And as the dust settled on the case, the city of Wichita was leagues, with a disturbing realization. The killer had been closer than anyone ever suspected, and his reign of terror, in a way, would never truly end. The story was far from finished. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, because the world of crime is darker than you think.